Recording in progress. And let me see. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the virtual Cecilia Tan erotica reading. Since Arisia is not happening, I realized that, well, now I suddenly have the weekend free. And we're kind of back in lockdown mode mentally. So I was like, all right, why don't I do the reading that actually I should have done last year, at some point, and I just never got around to. So I decided let's go ahead and do it. It's been a while, and I've got some news stories that probably some of you have not heard yet. So since there have been no cons, I did record one of these previously for the virtual reader con. I don't know how many of you attended that. So where they had us pre-record the readings and then they just put them up for people to grab and listen to or watch. So that was kind of fun, but it was a little different because then it was like, okay, it's just me and my computer and whatever. I guess it's a little different when there's a little bit more interaction. So I like some interaction. I regret that I can't give any of you the weird freebies that have arrived at my house over the last 2 years, like I usually do at my Arisia reading, although no ice scraper came this year yet anyway. But lots of like, God, pens that have multiple colors and lights on the ends and et cetera, little things like that. But I don't know. It's been an interesting 2 years to say the least. So I wrote some short stories this year because I was procrastinating writing a novel. Like you do. And and actually one of my favorite YouTubers said the other day that 2022 is season 3 of 2020, and it feels so true to me because there's a way in which I keep saying things happened last year, but sometimes I mean 2020 and sometimes I mean 2021 now. So in 2020 I finally rewrote a book 1 of the Vanished Chronicles, which is my long suffering paranormal series that will be coming out from Tor Books one of these days, and finally fixed it, finally got all the ducks in a row and wrote it and got everything to work, and I really love it. And I went ahead and sent it to the editor, and now a year has passed and I haven't heard back, but I'm supposed to be working on book 2 in the meantime. Book 2, yay. And of course book 2 has been completely stalled for several months. But every time I got stuck basically on the novel, I wrote a short story. And some of them were because I got invited into anthologies, and some of them were I was just like, okay, God damn it, I need to write something because I'm stuck on this other thing, or I write stuff on it, but then it goes into nowhere and ends up I've tossed out numerous drafts of book 2. So I think I'm finally getting somewhere, actually. As of a week ago, last weekend, I did ass and chair time, and finally I think got the beginning into some sort of shape. And now the question is, tomorrow I'm going to do that again. I think I'm going to drink a giant bubble tea first thing when I get up and see if the caffeine and sugar will carry me through a whole day of focus, because that's what happened the previous week. And I'm like, apparently bubble tea is a magic elixir. I didn't realize this, or I forgot this because I haven't been going to get bubble tea. I made it at home, but I haven't been going to get bubble tea because I haven't been going anywhere. I've been staying home. So but yeah, so apparently I always knew that I needed a certain amount of sugar for my brain to work, but apparently the mixture of sugar and caffeine is extremely important also. Normally I don't put sugar in my tea, but bubble tea is a whole nother thing, right? So I have a couple of stories. I figure I'm gonna read all 3 of the ones that I picked, and then if there's still time, maybe I'll dig around in the archives or something. But they cover a pretty wide range of things, so and they were in an interesting range of sort of anthologies. So this first one is actually what was billed as a romance anthology, an erotic romance anthology called, oh, now I'm going to forget the name of it. Damn it. I'll put the link in the thing later, but one more to the waiting room. But the thing that's interesting is that most romance anthologies, they want you to write like a whole novella. Like they want like a 10 to 20,000 word thing. They essentially want like a romance novel, but kind of condensed down to something a little bit shorter so they can put people together. This one there was a 1,500 word limit, and which is very unusual. And it had to be very, very erotic. So they were making an erotica anthology, but because it was all romance writer focused. They called it a romance anthology. So you know me, it's like genres, labels. I'm not big on any of them. I'm like, I'm the one who's like, it doesn't matter how many choices for gender you give me on my check boxes. I don't still know which one to check. So, genre same. But so this one went into a romance anthology, but it was really an erotic anthology as far as I'm concerned. So it's called Art in Oils. And it's fairly light in tone, shall we say. You ever wake up on the studio floor to find yourself spattered with paint, unsure how it got there? No? Just me then. Peach and pink and a touch of mysterious blue are smeared on my left hand and across my thighs, my right hand still gripping a brush. I doubt I was actually asleep or unconscious. That feeling of coming to happens when I've been in a state of creative flow or when I'm held on the edge of arousal for a long, long time. What was I working on? I look up at the canvas and I blush. The romance novel cover, right. I almost didn't take this commission, but the book I'm painting the cover for must really be something. The publisher's specs: 6-pack abs, a smooth chest, blonde hair flowing past the shoulders, and I quote, a mouth lush enough to kiss. Sounds easy enough. But while painting that mouth, I started to think, lips closed or parted? If parted, should you see his tongue? Should the tongue just be barely touching his lip as if he's about to speak or about to wet his bottom lip in anticipation of placing that mouth against? I have to catch my breath as my memory flashes behind my eyelids of that mouth nestled between my legs. Ripples of desire rocket through my core and spread across my arms, raising goosebumps. My fingers clench. I want to grab onto that pair of perfect buns and pull at him until the rhythm of our pleasure meets. The cover design only calls for him to be nude from the waist up. Screw that. I can't even remember for the moment if he's supposed to be in a kilt or a jeans or what. I get to my knees to work on the lower left of the canvas with a fresh brush. I start filling in the figure below the waistline. To go with those abs, of course, he needs sex lines. Even in art school, that's what they called that extremely lickable V on a man, just inside his hip bones. The first time I saw those lines on a real human and not a magazine spread was in a figure drawing class with a live model. Oliver was the model, positioned right in front of me, and I'll never forget that I blurted out, "That's real?" The highly amused look on his face had told me he thought I was talking about something else. "Not that," I stammered. I tried to indicate the diagonal on his abdomen. I didn't know muscles could look like that. That was also before I knew you could spritz a model with a bit of oil and water to give them an extra sheen. I blurted again, but in a whisper, "Can I touch it?" I needed to feel that sculpted shadow, to capture the tension of those muscles, as well as what that V pointed to. He said yes. The publisher specified a hairless man, but since this part of the painting is for me alone, I gave him a smidge of fur down there, that treasure trail that leads from the belly button straight down to the treasure indeed. I used the same balance of carmine and vermilion and peach that made the mouth so lush to engorge the strokes below. I fall back into the fever dream that is flow, building up color and texture, switching to a smaller brush, capturing the curves of him, not just the hip bone, but the parts of him I know a book cover can never reveal. But as I said, these brushstrokes are for me. So I paint him erect. Oil paints are so much better than watercolors for showing a sheen of sweat, for capturing that gravid droplet of arousal fattening at the engorged slit. My own thirsty tongue searches my lip. I ought to work on his face more as well. I stand, I change brushes, I change palettes. Hair, a touch of goldenrod and straw. Eyes as green as, wait, they're blue. They specified blue. I step back to force myself to take a breath and take in the whole figure. He's a fantasy object so perfect, readers will want to lick the glossy cover of the book when they see him. I shiver as my muse snakes his arm around my waist, fingers skimming my own stomach, taut with desire. His hair brushes against my neck as he murmurs in my ear, "I look rather come hither, no?" You always do, I reply. If there hadn't been an invitation in his eyes, would I have even dared to speak to him, much less touch him, that first time? I got scolded, for touching a model, even though it truly was, to better understand how those muscles corded together, how they moved under his skin, and not a sexual thing at all, as I swore loudly to the professor. But rules are rules, and anti-harassment rules are there for a good reason, so I never touched a model again. But I didn't have to, because Oliver brought me home after that class to investigate every part of him that I wanted. The athletic line of his leg, the curve of his rib, the soft fuzz at the nape of his neck. I touched it all, both au naturel and slicked with baby oil. The textbooks say that the great masters of Renaissance art created while entranced in religious fervor. Recent biographers say they painted while suffused with erotic heat. I think they're the one and the same. I worshipped every curve I painted, and I still do. My muse laughs softly, pressing against me from behind as my fingers stray lower. Do you need me to pose again? Now that my Zoom call's done, I can get back to it. I reach behind me with the brush still in hand to feel the edge of his t-shirt and then his bare thigh. Don't tell me you went to a meeting with no pants on. All right, I won't tell you. His hand grasps my hip. I'm not wearing pants either, because over the years, I've learned that this kind of thing happens when Oliver is your muse. Now, feet together and bend over. He teases me by pushing his cock between my thighs, not into me, but into the fleshy, sensitive space created when I squeeze my legs together. There's so much sensitive flesh there, and I'm already so turned on from the act of painting him, it feels almost like penetration, maybe even better than penetration, especially after he adds lube and begins to speed up. The pallet is on the floor by now, and I brace my hands on my knees as he rubs in and out more firmly. I try to surreptitiously slip a finger against my own dewy pleasure, but he grasps my wrist and pins it against my back, admonishing me. I can't let you get off or you'll never finish this painting. But I, on the other hand, deserve all the pleasure I can wring from you. He groans as his hips snap and I breathe a scent as rich as butter. You think I can watch you paint like that and not be this aroused? But I know I'm helpless, as artists always are before their muses, as I have been since that first day all those years ago. But I'm so close. No, you're not. You haven't even painted the poor chap's clothes yet. He is pretending to be obtuse, but he relents, sort of. He pulls away. Fine. I shan't come either until you've finished the painting. I moan needily as he releases me. The painting will need to dry overnight before I can add the kilt, and I cannot wait that long. Besides, looking at the canvas again, I realize I prefer this painting just as it is. Well, almost. Here, I grab the tube of hunter green, mix it with a dab of white on the palette, and change the eye color until it matches Oliver's. And one more swipe of goldenrod across the ring finger to make him mine. There, done. He laughs and spins me in a circle, appraising my paint-spattered legs. Into the shower with both of us then, where I can give you a proper fucking. There's too much paint on both of us right now. I laugh as I wrap my hand around his erection and pull him toward the bathroom. That's when I realize that he's slick, not with baby oil. The baby oil I use to make his skin shine when he models, but you used my good cold-pressed flaxseed oil? He shows no remorse, rutting into my hand. It's food safe, isn't it? I can hardly be mad at him, not when he's entirely willing to lick me clean. There's, of course, a little bit of, commentary about the world of romance, romance novels in there. I had to. Right? There's also a secret about that story that I'll tell you later after I've read the other pieces, because I'll tell you that later. If I remember, somebody remind me. Claudia, it's your job to remind me that I have a secret to tell you. Some of you will have figured it out by the time you've heard all three of these stories, probably, but I don't know. We'll see. I've made some resolutions, some New Year's resolutions, except they were last year's New Year's resolutions, and they've worked their way in. All right, let's see. Okay, I'm gonna read another one that's also similar length. Like I said, I been writing these long novels that have been writing for a long time. So writing stories where you can fit it all into, 3-4 pages of manuscript pages is really, really super fun. And in a completely different skill. I mean, it's more like, I don't know, writing poetry or whatever. It's like you've got your symphonies that are taking you, years to develop because you've got so many different moving parts and you got to learn all the, whatever, et cetera, right? And then I don't know, some duke somewhere hits you up for a chamber music piece for their duchess's birthday, and they need it by this week, and it's like, okay, Mozart, right? Yeah, it's like, oh, okay, you need this thing that's only 5 minutes long, I can do that. So yeah, I don't know, that's the stage I've come to now with, I don't know, with fiction, because I feel that writing short stories and writing novels are really two different skills in a lot of ways. Like, people, it's still taught as prose fiction, like when you go to get an MFA or whatever, it's like you take short story classes, you take novel classes, you take, all these different things, and you're just considered a fiction writer. And then, you have to decide whether you're going to do stories or a novel for your thesis, but it's still basically considered fiction writing, whereas poetry is like, different people teach poetry from the people who teach fiction, right? But I really feel like the short story and the novel are basically just, it's two different media. I mean, they really are two different media as far as I'm concerned. And the older I get, the more I think that, but this is why. Right? All right, so this is a story that was in an anthology called Unfettered Hexes. I think this is the one that I read for the ReaderCon virtual reading. So if you've heard it before, my apologies, but you get to hear it again. The Unfettered Hexes was an anthology from a small queer science fiction press called Neon Hemlock. I don't know how many of you are familiar with them, but they're super cool. They're in the DC area. They're run by a writer/editor named Dave Ring, who also organizes the what do you call it? The outright sort of queer book fair every year, which of course hasn't happened now for a year or two because of COVID. But he got into publishing like you do, and next thing you know, running a publishing house, and it's like, been there, done that. Yeah, so this one, the book came out several months ago, and is kind of fun, but it covers a lot of different queer sexualities and so forth, but the overarching theme was that everything had to have some kind of ritual magic in it, so and I'm like, ritual sex magic, I do that, in fiction anyway. So I was like, okay, and I had pitched him two ideas. I'm like, I can either write you a Magic University story, of which there are many yet to be told, or I can go in this completely other direction and write you this sort of almost literary second person story that is super dirty and subversive in its own way. And he was like, let your heart determine, whatever. So of course I did a tower reading and it came up with this. I did end up writing a Magic University story also that I'm not going to read you because that one ended up being not erotic. I know, go figure. But because that one was for a YA anthology, and so it had to not have sex in it. It had, sexuality in it, but no actual on-screen sex. So I won't be reading you that one, but it's out there in a book called School Books and Sorcery. So, but this one's from Unfettered Hexes, and what is the title of this one? Sacred Heart. So after all that, you want me to mend your broken heart. Sorry, can't help you. You think I can burn incense made from the ashes of love letters or some shit? I can't fix a broken heart. I can only fix your broken lust. What? Did you not realize that's broken too? Well, they say recognizing your problem is the first step. The real first step, though, is throw salt. It does little good to be bitter. You're the only one who'll taste it. Every good chef knows to counteract bitter, not with sweetness, but with salt. How many rituals start with salt? All of them, Tiger, all of them. The salt is to purify. They know that everywhere in the world, from the Gaelic hedge witches to the Shinto priests. So go on, let it fly. It makes a safe space. Be pure. Tell me, what did your lover do that burned you to a crisp? Oh, not all at once, of course, or you would have been out of there in a hot second. But you know what they say about the frog being in the gradually heating water? No, not bubble, bubble, toil, and trouble. Just what kind of witch do you think I am? They say the water comes to a boil gradually enough, the frog never jumps out of the pot. Don't blame yourself, Tiger. You didn't know you were killing yourself. The same is true of water turning to ice. If it happens bit by bit, you don't notice till it's too late. How long ago did the fire go out? Oh, it was a toxic relationship, you say. Poison can get you the same way, seeping in gradually, seeping right under your skin, dampening your ardor. You know what I'm going to have to do? Suck out the poison. I can do that, if you'll let me. What, you think I'm just going to latch on like a lamprey? You're not ready for that. You've been through too much. I can see you gripping your lust so hard you could crush it in your fists like it's the hilt of a sword, like you're going to do battle, kill some troll. Come here, relax. I need to be soft to firm you up, the lightest of touches to make your flesh swell and rise. Bodies come in many shapes, but nearly all have a point right near the heart, where if I put my mouth right there, see? So firm now, small and hard as an acorn or a seed ready to be planted, ready to be nurtured until it grows into something new and green. The roots reach lower down, right down here where everything's now hot and tight. Suck out the poison. That's what I'll do now. Good and wet to nourish the roots. Nature provides the wetness of my mouth. I can suck softly or I can suck hard, or both. To draw it out, I like drawing it out. There it is. Let it flow. What's that? You can't remember when's the last time you felt free to just lie back and let someone else do the work? Does it feel like work? Or does it feel like play? I better play with you now, with my hands, my fingers. When was the last time you played with yourself? And I mean really played. I don't mean rubbing one out in the restroom during your 9 to 5 or a quick one in the shower before bed so you didn't have another fight with your lover about what you wanted and they didn't. When was the last time you touched not only your flesh, but your dreams? When you let your fantasies wander? Who do you see walking into your vision while your ardor ramps up? Who do you want to see coming through the door? This is how conjuration works, Tiger. It's my hand moving, but it's your rhythm. It's my voice, but it's your vision. We're getting to it now. It must hurt. I can hear you whimpering. Maybe I better suck out a little more poison. Much better. Nothing's wrong with your eyes. I see them shining. Now, who do you see? Oh, not me, Tiger. This isn't about me. Oh, it's not just who you want your lover to be that's hard to see. It's who you want yourself to be. I'll let you in on one of the secrets of the universe. That's true of everybody, Tiger. Okay, maybe not the people who don't question. That's why they don't have the answers. They've never had to look for them. The conservatives, the conformists, they do as they're told. We folk, though, we question. It's in our nature. It's hard for others to know you if you don't know yourself. It's hard for others to love you if you don't love yourself. You know when you're your true self? Oh, we'll get there. Don't worry. We'll get there. Every ritual is a journey with a beginning, middle, and end. Lust leads places. It leads to all kinds of things. It leads you to nibble on the back of your lover's neck, to lick the back of their knee. That sounds like nonsense, but makes perfect sense if you've bent their leg just like this. That's the way, Tiger. Lust leads to rash decisions sometimes. Sometimes that's how we land in hot water. But you can't just stop wanting. You'll never get anywhere that way. You'll just circle around and around and around, and don't mind if I do. I'm taking you all the way. Once the candles are lit, once the flames are a flicker, once we start down that path together, we have to walk the whole circle. We have to go and come back to be whole. You're doing great, Tiger. Chanting's good. Chanting's fine. Right about now is when people start to call out to whatever gods they believe in. Repeating the names of the gods, whether chanted or sung, is one of the most ancient invocations. I hear you calling out my name in rhythm like a freight train, but I told you I'm not here to fix your broken heart. Only you can do that. That's lust talking, Tiger. We'll see if you still feel that way after. I told you this is about getting you where you're going, about you finding out who you are in the moment when all other thoughts stop, when the magic just hits you. That's power. Don't you feel how close you are to it? You thought folks were joking when they'd ask, did the earth move for you? Shake, rattle, and roll, Tiger. Shake, rattle, and roll till you get there, till you come. Some come quiet like a cloud crossing the moon. Some come together like waves meeting and sending up spray. Some say they got lost in the moment. What they've lost is their head. And this isn't about that, is it? When you lose your mind, what do you keep? When you come, it'll feel like your body supernovas into a billion tiny atoms blasting through space, through every dimension. When you come, you go and go and go. You think your X matters on a cosmic scale? You are bigger than galaxies, filling the infinite space between stars before gravity begins to pull you back together, before you coalesce once again, right here with me, as you fit back into your skin. I love the taste of your skin, but you know it's just a shell, right? We are luminous. Our place in the universe isn't determined by the shape of that shell nor the depth of our pain. I can see you looking out at me from behind dazed eyes. Who are you, Tiger? Can you tell me? It's not as important to tell me as to tell yourself. What are you feeling? You're sure? I told you You're sure? Well, maybe there's a reason I offered to help in the first place. You had to get there for yourself, though. Lead can't be made into gold, no matter what you've heard. But I suppose I can admit it now. Lust can transmute to love, if you let it, if I let it. It can only happen in a space where I feel safe. Yes, like this one. That's magic, Tiger. That's magic. You figured out the secret yet? The second person is so much fun to write in. I haven't written a second person story in a really long time. And erotica is one of the few genres I feel like where it really works. The second person is very similar sometimes to the first person, but it's, you know, because it has those constraints where you're kind of, unlike third person where you can kind of, there's more sort of, you can put in the frame. Second person is very narrow. First person doesn't have to be that narrow, but it's, yeah, you know. There were actually, believe it or not, more puns in the first draft that I ended up taking some of them out. But they're not puns, they're wordplay, you know, they're whatever. But yeah, I did tone it down a little bit, but there's literally one in like every paragraph where there's double meanings and, you know, I don't know, poetic callbacks to previous phrasing and, you know, so forth and so on. So, in which you can do in a novel, but it's so much easier to do when you've only got 1,500 words to play around with. You know, it's much easier to make those connections. And it's easier for the reader to tell those connections are there. I mean, if I do something in chapter 2 and I call it back in, you know, chapter 15, sometimes it's like, I don't know. I don't know that anyone's going to get it necessarily, but me, but they don't have to. They don't have to. It's the, you know, the artistry is in, the artistry is not the experience, right? So, I mean, I've got stuff in Darren's Guitar Chronicles where I put something in, you know, around, I don't know, when we were about 30,000 words in, and then, you know, 1,000,000 words later, literally, it finally comes back around. So, you know, I don't know. That's how my brain works. Anyone have any questions while we're at it? You can always ask me questions, you know, you can put them in the chat. And, you know, you can DM them to me even because it's Zoom, right? If you don't want everyone to see your question or see who's asking the question. I used to teach a lot of, you know, like sex and relationship workshops. So what I always do is I would give everybody index cards at the beginning, you know, I'd be like, this is because some people are like, I don't know if I want to answer this right in front of everyone or in front of the person I brought to the thing, but I really want you to ask, you know, to talk about a thing. And I would have, I would usually give 2 cards and then people would, you know, write stuff down. I would go around and collect them. And I was like, if you don't have a question, just, write a blah, 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 whatever. I love giving people homework, to do. It's like, okay, while we take a break, everyone think about such and such and write a thing on your card. And then I'll go around and collect them. And then I page through them and be like, oh, okay. And here's one, somebody really, really wants me to address this burning question, but they're afraid to ask. That kind of a thing. So, that especially teaching that, like, I don't know, these like adult ed type classes where, often what's funny is that every time I taught one of these like intros to BDSM classes or whatever for one of them, almost everyone in the class was somebody who was middle-aged and recently divorced and trying to get back into the dating scene, and whatever. And, and taking the sort of Ravenclaw method of being like, I'll take a class, it's just like, great, you're my people. So half of them ended up being like, the first half would be like, I don't know, almost just like meeting people 101 and then getting into the kinky part like afterward, because a lot of people were like, we need to take a step back and like, but how did we get to here at this point? And it's like, okay, here you go. Yeah, I went and taught it in Toronto a couple of times even, which was kind of fun because Canadians are super polite, like like there's always already that reputation, but then I was like, wow, you guys are so polite that it's like that they're literally afraid to speak. Some of the time I'm like, no, really, it's all right, it's okay. Let's see, someone's asking, any more baseball themed erotica? I haven't written any lately. I wrote a baseball themed short story in the summer it was in the National Pastime, which is a journal that I edit. But my co-editor was basically like, we need a short story or something that addresses this issue. Because for once, the journal is usually about the history of baseball, but because it was going to be an all virtual convention and COVID and whatever, we decided to make it about the future of baseball. And he was like, we don't have anything about the future of women in baseball. And I'm like, well, the future of women in baseball has basically arrived, where now we've got over the last 2 years, basically, we all of a sudden have major league coaches who are women, strength and conditioning coaches, hitting coaches, whatever. And Rachel Balkovic just got made the first female manager of an affiliated team. She's of course at low A, which is the very, very bottom of the minor leagues, but the Yankees made her a manager. So that's, like that kind of groundbreaking is happening all the time. But there's still, of course, a woman has still not played in Major League Baseball. And a woman has not yet played for an affiliated minor league team, but that is coming. There are a couple of women who are pitching in other professional leagues around the world, and this and that. So like that's coming. So I wrote a short story, but there's no sex in it. It's about the female pitcher, female relief pitcher, and it's science fiction because it's the future, and whatever. And so I got to put in all these things that are in the journal about, like, I don't know, gene therapy and this and that and whatever. And I made it's at Fenway Park in the future, and because of climate change, Fenway is one of the few parks left that isn't an enclosed dome. And they had to build like a super expensive weather shield over it to preserve it, and whatever, just stuff like that. So super fun. And just that's the whole fun of science fiction, right? Where it's like, okay, let's take the science, and so I got to put all kinds of things into this one very short story that are mentioned elsewhere in the journal. So that was kind of fun. But yeah, super fun. Nightcap at the Merrill Library. Yeah, I'd like to go back to Toronto. I'd really like to go back to Montreal. And I guess there's going to potentially be a NASFIC in Winnipeg. Is that right? Since Winnipeg didn't win the Worldcon bid, they're putting in a NASFIC bid instead, because there's always a NASFIC when the Worldcon isn't in North America. So I don't know. I don't think I've been to Winnipeg. I don't think I have. I think so. It would be a yes, there was a women's league during World War II, the All American Girls Professional Baseball League, about which the movie A Game of Their Own was made. But yeah, kind of cool. But yeah, there's been no women's professional baseball in the United States since then. But we can talk about women in baseball some other time. It is, in fact, can you tell, a topic near and dear to my heart. But Yeah. And it will undoubtedly come up whenever there's a science fiction baseball panel. Yeah, these days it always comes up because it is the actual future of the game right now, is that women are going to break the gender barrier in the same way that Jackie Robinson broke the maybe not exactly the same way, because of course Jackie Robinson represented an entire cohort of players who were playing in the Negro leagues and who were developing their talents and, you know, so forth and so on. And so whereas women don't have the chance to build up that same size talent pool because we're just not allowed to play baseball in this goddamn country. But yes, we're shunted straight to softball all the time, even in Little League. So just, it's unfair. Anyway, okay, I have to give a warning before this next story, and which I normally don't do. Most of you are adults, and you came to what was billed as an erotica reading, so what you're going to hear is probably going to have sex and of varied forms, and so forth. And then I occasionally will give the warning, like I learned that before I read a vampire story, for example, I should warn people that there will be vampires and there will be blood. It's like, okay, that's some people's big trigger and whatnot. I mean, I learned this. I literally went on a book tour in the 90s. And I was reading at a gay bookstore in New York City called A Different Light. And I thought, of all the hardcore places, whatever, this is not one of the places where I needed to give a lot of like warnings or whatever. And I read a vampire story and a woman fainted during it. I never found out if it was actually, the story that did it, or if she just, like didn't eat or whatever. Her partner ran and got her like a glass of water and, and then they ended up leaving before the end. So I never found out, what it was. And the very next day I did a reading at my parents' house in the backyard, because my mom threw me a book launch party. This is when my HarperCollins collection had just come out. And she threw basically the same party that like a suburban mom in New Jersey throws for their graduating high school senior. So, like she put up a tent in the backyard and she got Filipino caterers and, so we had a whole pig and, all that kind of thing. She heard a band, and whatnot like that. And I was in a little tent off to the side with like this couple of cartons of books and like, the tennis pro who taught me tennis when I was 10 and, all my English teachers and, like my mom's chiropractor, all our family, cousins, second cousins, godparents, they're all there. So like 200 people in the backyard. And then, and I'm signing copies of the book for people and, whatnot. And I'm thinking, okay, a lot of these people are going to go home. They're going to put this book on the shelf and they're just going to be like, oh, Cecilia wrote a book, and they're going to and they're not going to read it. Right. This is what I told myself, because I wasn't really sure I was ready for the what do you call it? The tennis pro taught me tennis when I was 10, reading by deep erotic fantasies, but I guess you get used to it. I don't know. But at one point, my mom comes up to me and she's like, everyone's waiting to hear you read. And, so I was like, oh, that's on the schedule tonight. I didn't realize that. And so I had to get up there and read. And I was like, okay, well, I said, I'm looking through the book. Book's got like 25 stories in it, maybe. And I'm like, please let there be, and I thought to myself, okay, I don't want to happen what happened yesterday. So don't read that story. So don't read any vampire stories. Is there one in here? I was like, please let there be one in here that's science fiction and that's funny. And and like ideally like a lesbian story, because people, suburban heterosexuals are much less freaked out by lesbians than they are by gay men and trans folk. It's just the way it is. Don't ask me why. So I'm like, all right, fine. Fortunately, the very last story in the book is a science fiction, so it's in the future. So you dislocate people from the current political reality. It's funny. It's, it's a lesbian story, and all the sex is right at the end. So I could kind of, some of my stories, like they start with a sex scene and, so I'm like, so this way I'll work them up to it. And if I really feel like the vibe is there, I can always cut off like right before the sex scene starts and leave people hanging, or whatever. I ended up reading the whole thing because they were into it. And I was just like, okay, my suburban neighbors are cooler than I thought. But yeah, after having had someone faint at the reading the night before, I was just like, okay, I got to be careful. So that said, the warning on this story is that there are themes of grief and loss and death in it. Nobody dies in this story. I don't do that. I shouldn't say I don't do that, because of course there are some novels where, you know, science fiction adventure is taking place, wars are happening, you know, so forth and so on, and people can die. But for the most part, you know, I embrace the idea that part of my job is taking care of the reader, you know, and I try not to hit people with stuff that is really going to potentially trigger them or affect them extremely negatively without letting you know. So this is also a very short story, same length as the other two. This is also undoubtedly that I am finally processing the grief, I don't know, of some of my own losses in my life, all of whom were people I knew through the leather community. And of course, processing sort of, I don't know, leather community politics in its way too. So, you know how if anyone wants to nerd out about leather community politics, I can do that, but I'm retired from leather community politics and have been for some time now. So maybe that's why I can finally talk about it. I don't know. But I'll read this one. So it's called The Dark Room. I don't know if any of you have ever been to a dark room party where it's essentially an orgy where it's completely dark and there's no lights, there's no, you know, I mean, you can talk obviously, but you know, it's like everything is completely tactile and, you know, extra sensory, except that you can't see anything, right? So that is where this idea came from, although it is not exactly a darkroom party, as you will see. It is also somewhat a funny story in some ways, but even if it has some sad emotions in it as well. Let's see. Make sure I have all the pages. Yes, okay. I hate committees. I hate meetings. Much as I love my fellow committee members, we always get sidetracked into debating if the group should boycott Facebook, if only, or whether the endorphin high from relentless edging can lead to hallucinations, an urban myth, and don't try Tide Pods either. But I must admit, sometimes good ideas come out of collective brainstorming. The trick-or-treat themed play party, though, it started out simply enough. Party planning for October. Everyone's already thinking Halloween. I mentioned I'd seen Wolfington Manor was available to rent for private functions again, and it had been, what, 10 years since there'd been a kinky party there? Suzanne jumped right on it as the perfect venue, assuming that the new management didn't mind nudity, and we didn't mind the rumors that the place was haunted. Billy brought up how, when he was in Girl Scouts, their troop ran a fundraising haunted house every year, and each room was set up with some kind of scare, like sticking your hands through a curtain into it, full of eyeballs. Peeled grapes, he explained, which led us to brainstorming tricks or treats for every room, which led to me being bound to the medical exam table in the dark room. Why do I have to be blindfolded if it'll be pitch dark? Because when they first step into the room, a little light might leak in, and they'll be blindfolded too. Why? Because it's more fun that way. All in favor, say aye. It had to be me or Lally in the dark room, they said, because we're the only ones so pansexual we could handle all comers. But Lally has that big collection of electrical toys, so the role of mad scientist made much more sense. It all sounded so logical at the time. But lying here in the dark, with nothing but my breath and my heartbeat in my ears, I'm starting to have second thoughts. Starting to think about Micah. We'd been so drunk on new relationship energy the last time we were here. I were dating, what, 2 months at the time? He had a wicked imagination and would have absolutely loved this party idea, but he never would have let me be darkroom bait unless maybe he were the one controlling it. Micah turned possessiveness into my safety net, into a set of rules that ensured that nothing and no one ever penetrated me or even touched me without his permission. This hole is mine, he used to say through gritted teeth as he fucked me, or whispered sweetly to make me blush in the supermarket. After he died, I didn't know how to mourn. I didn't know how to free myself when he'd never uncollared me. Throwing myself into community organizing was the only thing that made me feel as wanted and as needed as I had when he was alive. The meeting minutes do note that the vote was unanimous. I put myself here, hands bound to the corners of the table somewhere above my head, ankles to the stirrups that leave my knees half bent and my ass hanging over the edge of the table. The heavy drape rustles, and for a moment I hear the whisper of someone in the hallway, not loud enough to make out what they say. The point of the dark room is to be almost sensory deprivation, all the way down to the windowless wine cellar, far away from the music and screeches of delight as tricks are played and treats are given. Peeled grapes, Billy swears. Whoever it is, they've probably been told to feel their way. A cool hand finds my ankle, fingertips sliding up past my shin, past my knee, then slowly up my inner thigh. A low chuckle, then their fingernails begin to rake, pausing only when they coast into my haphazardly trimmed pubic hair. The scratch over the landscape of my hip, eventually climbing to the peak of my nipple. I clamp my lips together to keep from crying out as one nail flicks back and forth like a pendulum, catching it on every tick, every talk. My nipples have always been like on buttons, but as fingers pinch them taut and then rub, it's like a striker being scraped over a match head. 2 match heads, igniting desire that quickly spreads throughout my body. Whoever they are, they don't stay long, though, patting me as if to apologize for running back to the well-lit and raucous upstairs. At midnight, there will be bobbing for butt plugs. Who would want to miss that? I'm not alone in the dark for long, though. Again, the whisper, and I feel the air move against my now damp skin. I hear the noise of surprise as cool flesh brushes the side of my leg, and then hands walking across my bare belly, figuring out which direction I'm oriented, and finding my armpits fully exposed. The tickling begins before I've even had a chance to dread it. How could I have forgotten? This is some people's kink. Laughs tear out of my lungs like bats out of the maw of hell, flung forth by the force of nature, my body shaking and squirming like a desperate sea creature on a dock. Oh God, oh God, oh God, I can't breathe, except I am breathing, great gawping lungfuls in between the peals. And then they step back, giggling helplessly themselves, and leave me limp. Tickling had never struck me as sexual before, but I am hot as Hades now, and I don't even believe in hell. It dawns on me that a line must be forming outside. Some who enter the dark room feel around until they encounter the gloves and lube on the side table or the vibrator. Others press their mouths to mine, ignoring my yearning body and concentrating every bit of pleasure and connection into just our lips and tongues and breath. Some enter as twosomes or threesomes, overwhelming me with multitasking. One pair unbinds my hands to unlock 2-player mode, 2 joysticks, no waiting. One of the 2 comes with a shout, hot seed spurting between my fingers. His partner growls with need, but pulls away from my grip. I hear them kissing, the wet hush of mouth against mouth. And then one asks the other, "So you think it's okay?" "There wouldn't be condoms here if it wasn't," says the other. I don't recognize their voices, but they sound nice enough. "Go on, here, I'll help." The telltale tear of the condom packet, the grunt of arousal as one strokes the other to readiness, the click of the lube bottle cap. I've never been fucked by a total stranger before, and butterflies bat against my insides. He lines himself up between my legs, fingers searching, spreading lube up and down right where my pleasure is most intense until one digit drives in deep. I moan with need because it's not enough. It's not nearly enough. Then my breath catches as I hear a voice whisper in my ear, "This hole is mine." Ow! The man between my legs jerks back as if stung, and he says to his partner, "If you didn't want me to, you could have just said." "Me? I didn't do anything," comes the reply. "Felt like an electric shock or something." "Geez, well, maybe this one's a trick instead of a treat. Come on, let's not be late for butt plug bobbing." "Told you." They leave, and a few moments later, I think I'm alone in my agony, helpless with need, my freed hands reaching out into the dark just because they can. I feel familiar fingers interlock with my grip. "Micah?" His scoffing tone is so familiar. Don't act surprised. The veil between the living and the dead is thinnest at midnight. My heart catches in my throat and I can barely breathe. "I've got time to grant one wish. What do you want, love?" I say what I'm supposed to say, what I can't help but say, and what is true all at once. "Fuck me. Oh God, I want you to fuck me." My hands clutch at nothing. Something brushes over my pubic stubble. He sounds sad. "This was your chance to beg for freedom, you know. My chance to grant it." "I don't want it," I gasp, voice rough as razor blades. "Freedom is overrated. So is healing." Masochist. You know it. He sighs, and it sounds like the wind through the screen door, blown open by a blustery October night. The truth is, you've always belonged to yourself, love, but I suppose I can live with, he chuckles, you giving yourself to the community 364 days a year. But on one night, you're mine again, hmm? He enters me then, wholly, fully, and it's almost beyond what I can bear. The committee voted unanimously to hold the Wolfington Manor party every Halloween. See you next year, love. See you next year. Ah, I'm crying. Damn it. Thought I could get through it. Like I said, finally processing. Finally processing some of the losses that have been building up over the last, 10 years, 15 years. Our whole society going through a lot of collective trauma probably was the last straw. So I wrote that one for, so Circlet Press, as you know, most of you, is the publishing house that I ran for many years. And 2 years ago, right before the pandemic came, of course, I sold it to Riverdale Avenue Books. So I don't run the press anymore. I'm still editing. But then of course the pandemic came, and so everything's been topsy-turvy. But I don't run the press every day anymore. Oh, somebody's in the waiting room. And which is great because I have more time to write. I have more time to actually concentrate on editing the people who are my authors and stuff like that. And one of the things that Circlet does is, or we've done on our website every year for several, I don't know, 7 years, 8 years, I don't for long enough that I can't remember how many. And Jennifer Williams edits basically a series every Halloween of Halloween themed microfictions. Halloween themed is pretty loose in its, in its definitions, and we put them on circlet.com. And this year she was like, well, and the thing was, we were supposed to give up the website and Riverdale was supposed to take it over and whatever, but they've been so slow in the transition between the pandemic, and then Riverdale's actual principal editor had breast cancer in 2020 and was basically knocked out for the whole year, and like all kinds of things have gone on, right? I mean, it's just, here we are in the third season of 2020 here in 2022, right? So I'm still running the website. Technically, it's still in my basement, whatever. And I'm like, yeah, sure, let's do another round of Halloween themed microfictions. And yeah, so I basically was like, oh, I'll write one. Yeah, sure, I'll write one. And so I went ahead and wrote that. That was like a one night, like, oh, they're due tomorrow kind of thing. So I just, sort of sat down and banged it out. And that's the time, I think, when writers are the most vulnerable in some ways, because you're in a hurry kind of, and your internal sensor is off. So yeah, out it came. All right, I'm gonna turn the recording off.